Little refresher since we haven't been around the hottest anime of 2016 in a while. I watched some of this a really long time ago and remember basically none of it. I watched the first 12 episodes on the channel a while back now. I remember thinking those episodes were pretty inoffensive, but also nothing really special at all. Seems like it's really taken its time. Ito was my favorite character because Deku seems a little too far down the meek main character path to start out for my taste, and All Might seems to be written so you love him, so I refuse to be taken advantage of in that way. The second opening covers the next 14 episodes, so let's see if the story and characters can get anywhere. I don't think it's any better than the first 12. It might not be any worse, but I don't think it's any better either. I like that the show takes some time to focus on another character, but the amount of characters present still really bogs down the runtime. I like that the show shows us a bunch of different powers and puts them on display in interesting ways, but the way the show actually does action scenes leaves a lot to be desired. I like that the show explores the theme of identity with the powers tied to oneself, but it also seems like the show wants to just say what it wants to say without exploring the thought very much. Let's talk about all that, and then maybe also throw another tier list in the video, huh? First though, the opening. The opening sort of encapsulates my feelings on this arc pretty accurately. Can a core also be an arc? Core is a strange second-level anime watcher term I've somehow learned out of nowhere that probably betrays my lack of experience in the space. Anyway, the opening feels very middle sibling. I think the music and visuals line up really well with the vibe of the episodes. Everyone's getting ready for the cool sports festival. Everyone's stretching out. Todoroki hits a mean sun salutation, fucking crushes that. The song just seems to me it might be a little uninteresting, or maybe uninterested in the show. And that's what I mean. It's a lot like this arc. Probably some good ideas on display. It just doesn't seem like the show ever gets around to spending the energy on making them cool. There are some nice shots though. I like this great big shot of All Might jumping through the city. Seems pretty technically impressive. I had a huge falling out with my friend over it though. Our relationship may never be the same. All Might phases through this railing if you look at it. Look at it, man. Look at the speed and trajectory. There's no way he gets over it. He phases through it. Can you not just look and see with your eyes, man? He just refuses to see reason, my friend, though. He just won't listen. There's more imagery of All Might being something to reach toward. In the first opening, Deku was literally reaching toward him. All Might is his hero, and being like him is his ultimate goal, especially now after inheriting his power, and now All Might is pictured above him as he looks up in admiration, obviously representing how he still has to work hard to reach the heights of his friend and mentor. I'll be surprised in the future if the shots including them don't gradually change to them being visualized on more level ground. It feels like there'll be a through line there somehow. The surplus of characters seem to really eat up a lot of time in this opening, also just like the rest of the show. I guess this whole arc is a sports festival, finally culminating in a tournament, so it demands you give some screen time at least to show the minor villainous children, so you're going to have some tension in your events and battles. But it feels to me that there are so many characters to give a second or two to that you don't get the cool action shots or poses for the characters you actually care about in this chunk of episodes, that being Deku and Todoroki. You get about one each, but it feels like there should be more. It's sort of interesting, really. I tend to imagine openings as just these really cool little music videos set before the show begins to maybe catch a new viewer's attention and also be obviously a lot of fun to watch. But I've never thought about how hard it must be to capture what a group of episodes is actually about artistically in a 90-second burst. That can't be easy. I think this one captures the low-stakes feel of the competition very well. I know it's not low stakes to the characters, but low stakes in the sense of no one or no thing is actually in danger. It's just, a competition. It wouldn't really fit if there was screaming guitars or choir chanting, would it? So you have to keep that in mind. Like if it was like sports, volleyball, obstacle course, I suppose it's sort of just a low-stakes opening for a low-stakes part of the story. Watching the show has really made me realize a few things that in the past I was probably completely blind to in the adaptation process from page to screen that a lot of these animes have to go through. Of course, when you think about it, animated fights have to have a lot of screen original content. For it to feel like a real living fight, adapting a few cool moves that were shown in the comic doesn't really capture the moment-to-moment intensity that I imagine a lot of people are expecting when you say the word fight. So a lot of good shows with high budgets in both money and time will spend time creating brand new actions for the scenes and leaving the actual prior illustrated moments from the manga as big highlights of the full scene. Now that's the way we all hope and pray that it's done, because that's what makes for the best scenes. There's that approach, and then there's the approach that this show seems to take just about every single time, where it's more of a direct adaptation, leaving the fights to be a lot of thinking, followed by single giant interactions that are once again often thought through in slow motion, and then a lull where the characters will once again think to themselves about the fight. This leaves the fights, in my opinion, feeling really stilted and slow, and feeling more like a strategy-based board game or something than anything with actual real intensity behind it. The intensity, it seems at least what the show is aiming for comes through the emotional aspects of each big fight scene or action. It's less about the actual physicality, it's more about what the character is saying with their actions in that moment. Each physical move is an expression of themselves in a way. Well, of course it is, it's what they're doing, but like more emotionally, I guess, than I'm used to. Todoroki's unyielding need to put up a giant ice wall between himself and his father manifests in his want to only use his mother's half of his quirk, and explosively so whenever called for. Deku's undying spirit in the face of adversity, the want to live up to All Might, is expressed through his willingness to injure himself, and then injure himself again on top of those injuries. Bakugo is angry and explodes everything. Because of this angle the adaptation decided to take, the one with less actual action tied to the show, it can feel to me that the action is really actually quite lacking. With that being said, I think this is the show that I really noticed for the first time where it has that quality of really trying to blow the audience's hair back in short but really explosively well animated moments of action with a boatload of crazy effects and blur and bloom and color warping. And that's all fine and well. I, like many of you, love to look at that kind of stuff because it's all really cool and impressive, obviously. And if the fights were filled to the brim with moments like this, I would obviously be singing a very different tune because then they'd be good. Potentially, no accounting for like choreography and stuff. But they're not. Most of the actual fight scenes so far in the show have been mostly standing around and talking and thinking, and that doesn't make for a very compelling action at all. Some people listen to these points I'm arguing and then think back to this final charge moment and say how amazing it looks, and that's not my point. I agree, that looked nuts, but that 10 seconds doesn't make for a compelling fight scene that lasted an episode. I know it's a tournament arc, and not even just that, there are other events in these episodes as well, so you're obviously going to need lower key action involved. The story demands it. So things not being high octane around the clock doesn't bother me, but when full episodes revolve around what is really supposed to be a single fight, and the fight is only a few sparse interactions, it doesn't really feel like a fight to me. I think in the other events, Deku's analytical mind actually reads a lot better, in the cavalry battle especially. Do I wish it was a bit more dynamic? Sure, you've got a gaggle of superpowered teenagers all running around trying to wrench something off each other's necks. You'd think it would feel a lot more explosive and chaotic than it actually is. Honestly, you'd probably expect a few broken necks and at least a couple fatalities. But I don't mind the thinking to oneself in that one so much, because it isn't a situation where the sole goal is two people kicking each other's asses. The strategizing was much more welcome from my end there. I think the best part of the entire sports festival was the obstacle course, actually. It felt like that was a much more natural way of showing off everyone's powers in cool and interesting ways. I think it's a real shame that it didn't take up more of the episodes. I think Deku shines brighter there than even the other events as well. His quick thinking and beating everyone else basically without powers really shows you why he deserves to be there. And hey, most of it actually looks really good too. You might see the most actual animation in this series so far in this little race that they do. My issue with the action scenes has actually started to bleed into the show as a whole, it seems now too. Another classic trick that I hate that anime uses to stretch out the time its fight scenes actually cover is the classic cutting to the audience moments. It's when there's a tense action scene happening, or maybe a momentary break in the bloodshed, and there will be a cut to those close to the combatants and their off-the-cut reactions to what's happening in front of them. Often these reactions don't actually add anything at all to the scene, no in-depth analysis is being made, just bland platitudes or shocked faces at how things are going. These moments are here to soak up time code, and strangely, actually, I think the litany of these moments in this arc are actually fine. If only for the reason that, hey, this is a sports festival, a spectator event, the fact that it's being spectated is in fact the whole point. So because of that, I can kind of get behind the evil that these usually pointless cutaways are. Yeah, it's a lot, but it's also important to show that the kids' feats are being viewed by the world as impressive. That's the whole point. So actually, no negative points on that account this time, show. You get a pass. What my actual gripe is that it's grown past the bounds of the fight scenes and has sprouted up in all the other scenes as well. Here's a really good example of it. Todoroki classically starts off the obstacle course by freezing a ton of people to the ground, right? Genius. Now that is a moment that should warrant some reaction, for sure. But count them, 9 separate reactions, counting both the crowd as a whole, as well as Todoroki reacting to so many people dodging his attack. 9 different speaking lines, all centered around one moment that could have been easily expressed by, I don't know, this shot that's already in there? Now, a single moment of this isn't anything to get a twist over. This is anime, after all. The over-the-top nature of it is something to be expected, if not celebrated. It's part of the medium. But this kind of thing happens over and over and over. If it's not the person something is happening to, it's their classmates on the sidelines. If it's not their classmates on the sidelines, it's Present Mic and Eraserhead. If it's not Present Mic and Eraserhead, it's Endeavor and All Might. If it's not Endeavor or All Might, it's the random pro heroes from around the city that we don't care about at all. And if it's not the random pro heroes from around the city that we don't care about at all, it's the suits. You know how I could have shortened up that list of people I just said? I could have not repeated myself at the start of every point on the list, and that probably would have made the list tighter and easier to listen to. You get what I'm saying? When you start to notice these things and you're looking at the time code for each episode as you do, you really start to notice how little content is in each episode. Okay, so I've noticed that anime openings tend to be basically exactly 90 seconds. I don't know if that's like an industry standard or whatever, but they tend to be a minute and a half. All well and good, but this season of this show actually starts with a 30-second filler recap animation of Deku talking about the world being filled with superheroes at the start of every single episode. That doesn't count as the opening, so that's 2 minutes down. On top of that, and I don't know if this is consistent through the rest of the series, but very strangely, each episode starts with a brief recap of the ending moments of the previous episode, usually told with slightly different dialogue, but still certainly exploring the exact same events that happened. And those moments usually take up another 90 seconds to 2 minutes. So that's up to 4 minutes down. The episodes tend to end after 22 minutes of time code, the rest being filled by the outro and a tiny next time on segment. But if we're really being a dick about it, the ending maybe 2 to 4 minutes is going to be recapped at the start of next episode anyway, so that time code becomes completely redundant as well. So if we're being the least charitable we can be to these episodes, that's 2 minutes of the 22 minutes for the opening, and the other 4 minutes that's going to be recapped anyway in 2 minutes next episode. But you gotta watch that content at some point, so we'll just average that out to 3. So that's 5 minutes. Add another 2 minutes on for the outro and next time on, and you have 7 minutes of the 24-minute full time code that is completely useless. This next part of this point actually doesn't matter at all for a critique of the show, but indulge me. If you were watching this on TV and had commercials and everything for a 30-minute time slot, 2 3-minute ad breaks, that gets you up to 13 minutes out of the 30 that are not necessary to watch this show. And that doesn't even account for all the cutting to other characters reacting to shit that you yourself are watching and don't need reactions to know what's happening or thinking to themselves. I'm sure there are episodes in this season where more than half of their time codes is completely and utterly superfluous. It's kind of crazy. I feel sort of bad that this video is going to be mostly about this more production side of things this season, because there is some stuff going on that I don't mind. Uraraka gets a couple of moments to talk about her motivation, and it's a really nice one. I like it a lot, despite it being kind of naive, but appropriately naive for someone in high school. The Stain stuff gets going, and Ida is tied to that. His brother gets got, according to his mother in the dub, which made me laugh. Don't say my brother got by a villain. What the hell does that even mean? That could mean anything from, oh, they broke his leg, to he was crucified in town square.
Oh, last year we had an Indian kid.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, but they got him.
What does that mean?
I liked him too.
Wait, what do you mean they got him?
But these thoughts and storylines really are only brought up for brief moments here and there in these episodes, so I really don't think they warrant much talk in this video about these episodes. There was actually one good episode, though, in this arc that I think really actually fucking got down to business and did a bunch of stuff with the time it had. It's episode 19, where the recap is largely skipped and we actually get to have a couple of really interesting conversations. The most important of which is between Todoroki and Midoriya. Todoroki tells Deku about his hatred for his own father and his goal of winning the whole tournament without using the fire half of his quirk just to rub his father's nose in it, and also posits that Deku and All Might have some sort of unspoken connection. Very interesting content. More of this, please. At the same time, the big boy version of this conversation is also happening between All Might and Endeavor. Endeavor resents All Might so much for being ranked higher than him. You also kind of get the vibe that it's more than that, and I hope it's more than that, and sees Todoroki as nothing more than a means to dethrone All Might from the #1 spot. I was actually kind of floored an episode started so strong, and then the rest of the episode is setting up the tournament bracket, letting those who want to drop out do so, and then we actually move right into what's going to be a fight next episode. It wasn't so bad. It sucks because I know this episode was paced this way so much smoother because the entire episode was based around characters standing around and talking, which doesn't call for all the time-eating tactics the show deploys so liberally. The show and dialogue was allowed to be interesting because it was people talking, not boring because it was people talking. I know this video has been pretty negative, but I'd call that a positive point. Now, before we get into the last semi-positive point, let's knock out a little brain exercise first. I've decided there will be a tier list in each of these My Hero Academia videos. There are so many characters to cover and talk about. Honestly, I think it's a decent way to frame covering them all briefly from a multitude of angles. If I ever get around to watching all of this show, there are 14 openings, so if I give you 14 tier lists where they're all involved across all of the videos, surely I must get across a solid message about how I feel about each one. That'll work, don't you think? No? Well, we're doing it anyway. The topic of today's tier list won't be how appropriate it is for each of them to be attending the most prestigious superpower high school in the country based on their powers. Today it will be about how solid of a person they seem to be across the first 26 episodes. Are they cool? Are they a good guy? Would you invite them to the cookout? If I was the 21st student in class 1A, how would I feel about each of these characters on a social level? We start with Bakugo, who is clearly a completely unlikable asshole. His only character trait still through this entire thing has been he is filled with an untetherable rage that he's only ever to slightly suppress in small bursts. He radiates terrible energy and would be stricken down by the vibe god if he were present in this hellish world. He is at the bottom of the tier list, obviously. Uraraka, despite having a slightly annoying name to say, is certainly in the friend material category. She's fun and keeps things light, get it? And even has the benefit of having a respectable, though a bit naive goal in wanting to become a hero, but that actually makes her more endearing. I wouldn't call her good attitude infectious, because a lot like me, the other students don't seem to often match her bubbly personality when she puts it on display, but she is the exact opposite of Bakugo. The vibe god would raise her to new heights. Deku, maybe surprisingly, I would say fits into the kid you never got to know tier right now in the story. I originally had this tier named as kid you forget about after you graduate, but that doesn't really make sense because you'd remember the kid that does the shit he does even up to this point. Deku has made a small circle of friends, but still seems largely skittish in social situations and doesn't seem to have made any real connections with other classmates outside of Tenya and Uraraka. He's just a quiet kid, doesn't make much of an impact socially. Todoroki goes in the whack category, monotone, unapproachable, has an air of self-importance about him. Sounds a lot like me in high school, honestly. I like that the show goes into why he has these qualities, but these qualities do also lend to a feeling that, from a perspective of a classmate, he probably wouldn't make a strong homie. Whack tier. Mountain Face, I'm still calling these characters by the things I know them as in my head, by the way, surely goes into the kid you never got to know category. He never says anything. Seems nice enough at a glance, but social interaction is a two-way street, compadre. You gotta meet me in the middle here. Tail Bastard, thus named in my head because I thought for some reason he didn't warn Midoriya about the purple-haired man's powers, despite knowing the trick until we got to the next episode, and it is revealed in a micro flashback that he did in fact tell him, but the name Tail Bastard stuck in my head, so here we are. Tail Bastard seems nice enough, but there doesn't seem like there's much to draw me into him either. Cool tail, cooler hero name. Kid you never got to know though. Earphone Jack actually has a bit more personality than the more background classmates I find. She's always giving Kimimari, is that his name? Electric Kid a hard time. But it's not like a bullying thing, it just seems like they're friends and she rips on him like a friend does. She can joke around and I think that makes for a potentially good friend. Don't know much else about her, but she can go in the friend category. French Laser Kid is annoying. I'm all for self-expression and being yourself, but if you don't filter that through the lens of awareness that the layman will find you annoying when you do it constantly, you're just going to come off as socially unaware. He's not mean or anything, he's just kind of a cringe lord. Whack. Kirishima, I think that's his name, a rock skin guy, has a loud and bold personality, but he isn't a flagrant asshole like Bakugo. He's like Bakugo if Bakugo wasn't a cartoon character. He seems appropriately happy or stoked or confused or whatever for any given situation. He's not that interesting, but he seems like a pretty socially adjusted guy. I'd give him the friend material group tier. Sue, now I'm definitely showing my immaturity here, especially if I was living in this world. Maybe I should be looking at it like that more, because if I was a 15-year-old, I would definitely not have the mindset to befriend the girl who was constantly hunched over with her hands curled up to her chest that talks like meatwad. I just wouldn't have it in me at that age, but if I was in this world, aware of her powers and animal-based quirks were a thing I'd have been aware of my whole life, I'd probably be way more open to it. And that, of course, is just blatant immature judging a book by its cover from me, because from what we see of Sue, she's a pretty cool person. She's pretty agreeable and brave and willing to throw a quip or two in there. I probably wouldn't get to know her very well, but I imagine other people probably would. Harvey is an interesting character at this point. He seems sort of scary, probably, from the perspective of his classmates. His power is kind of freaky and scary. He has a strikingly deep and imposing voice. He seems really serious all the time. I probably wouldn't want to make friends with this guy. Creation Girl seems so bland it's kind of crazy. Guess it makes sense her personality would be the all-rounder type since her power is to create anything. I don't know anything about her, so here she goes. Kiminari? I know I'm close with this kid's name. He reads to me a lot like Kirishima, but a lot less actually cool. He seems a bit dumber and a bit more immature, and that's before his powers fry his brains. I don't think I'd get a very good vibe from him. I don't know anything about the giant flesh wing man, other than he talks out of an orb on his elbow. You would hope that he's nice, I guess, but he hasn't made an effort to befriend anyone I've seen, and I'd definitely be too intimidated to approach him, so... Sugar Man. Whack. Purple Kid is a scourge on the classroom, clearly. He skeeves out all the girls, and that seems to be his only purpose in this show and in his life. That's it. Just be weird to girls. The fact that he isn't horribly ostracized by his peers both seems like a point speaking to their own qualities of good-naturedness and openness, and also like a straight-up plot hole. Die like the rest, Purple Bastard. Tenya seems a little too unapproachable to call friend material, really. He's really uptight and dutiful, spends a lot of time worrying about protocol, just doesn't seem like a lot of fun to be around at a glance. Maybe if you get to know the guy, you know, like Deku does, who knows, but I don't think I would really make an effort to. Demonic Pink Girl shares a lot of the same qualities as Uraraka, it seems, so much so that it seems to me like, why did you even bother putting her in the show? With that being said, would probably be fun to hang out with. Weirdly, Tape Spider-Man just has one of those stupid faces, you know? One of those friend faces, I feel like, you know what I mean? He seems as bland as a bowl of oatmeal, but he's just got that look about him. And there you have it, my tier list of the social hierarchy of the class based on my own fanfiction-ass insert character being there, I guess. It kind of evened out how my actual high school life life seemed. Weird. Maybe the show is more realistic than I thought. The one thing I think this show, this season, does well is the depictions of Deku and Todoroki. Todoroki mostly. He definitely has the most going on. Deku's goals and mindset have been apparent the whole show. Nothing has changed with him, but it's interesting to see him go up against Todoroki's view. Todoroki has had a difficult childhood in the exact opposite way to Deku. He's had it hard specifically for having a quirk, for being as powerful as he is, and at this point in their lives, Deku is trying to embrace his new power, his mentor's power, as much as he's physically able to, while Todoroki rejects half of his own power just because it's the same one as his father's. And these two competing mindsets come to blows in their fight, which is what actually saves that fight from just being completely mind-numbing. Deku's view is that if you have a power, it's part of yourself, not anyone else. It doesn't matter where it comes from. Refusing to use it isn't helping anyone. Putting your fear and self-doubt behind you is an integral part of what being a hero is. Todoroki's trauma and well-founded hatred for his abusive father is what brought him to this point in defying him entirely. Maybe not disagreeing with Deku on those thoughts, but being too mired in his own negative feelings to see past them. And I think that's a really cool pairing of character dynamics to put up against each other and have characters work through in a fight. This fight isn't that great. It basically boils down to a giant ice attack being shattered by big flicks over and over, but that's not the point at the moment. I think the show does a really good job in setting up these competing mindsets and giving them a lot of stakes. This is Deku's first real chance to show the world at large what he's made of, and this is when Todoroki can really prove to his dad that he doesn't need him. And I think it's a good moment when Todoroki does forget his pain for a second and joins Deku in giving it everything he has. My only problem with the moment is I feel like it didn't really take much for Todoroki to break and use his fire, you know? If you really look at it, it's only a few motivational words from Deku that gets him to forget years of abuse from his father against him and his mother. I don't really know how you do this moment better, if I'm being honest, having Todoroki start here and end here in such a short amount of time. It's strange. I think the best moment in the season here was unfortunately the single most rushed thing, when the rest of the show has every single moment play out at a snail's pace. I think the moment is sort of re-strengthened again though in the following championship fight, where Todoroki is confused, torn between his prior motivation and what he felt in the fight against Deku. It does a pretty good job in showing that those really heavy emotions aren't just something you get over instantly after some emotional words. He's still struggling with them. It's just that he had a momentary surge of motivation after Deku told him to claim the power as his own. I think that works a lot better in hindsight, and the moment of him rising to Deku's challenge is also still pretty nice, even if it is a bit fast. It's good that the best part of these episodes is the biggest, most important part at least. So we did end up closing it out on a positive note. Overall, I have to admit, I think these episodes were a pretty big downgrade from the first season. The first season had those opening two episodes, which I thought were basically incredible, and this season doesn't have a single moment to rival those at all. But even outside of that, things feel so sluggish basically all the time. Moments that should be fun and exciting are dragged down by the anime-ness of it all. Nothing besides a few moments in the closing episodes feels dynamic and fun in the way that I know and you know a show like this should be. So much of it feels like it's trying to drag stuff out for the sake of the show being longer. You could probably keep everything that's good about these episodes in and cut the episode count in half and have a far stronger show. Patreon shoutouts if you want to see a brand new video from me ahead of the YouTube release. You can support me on Patreon for just a few bucks. Link as always is in the description below the video. Biggest shout out to all, one of my top patrons, a flock of plain cakes, who if they touch 3 of your relatives in any way, they instantly know the big dark family secret. A2X Phoenix, who found like 30 hidden meanings in religious texts from all over the world, so I'm pretty sure they're the only one getting into any kind of heaven. Anthony Collins, who's the sole reason for those weird videos of sounds coming from the sky. It's just him, just over the horizon, screeching, his eyes rolled back in his head. Insomnite, whose hair accidentally caught fire once, but after focusing for a second, they just made it go out. Kevin Bartlin, who wears so many chains, they're valued at more than the GDP of the Marshall Islands. Creffin, who has the ability to time travel, but only covering business days. They call it business travel. It's a write-off. Midnight Bosoms, who I saw hit one of those half-court shots at an NBA game and actually won 10 times the amount they were supposed to because they bet on the guy who actually got to do it to actually pull it off. And Tater of Tots, who started levitating and speaking in tongues one day, and I'm pretty sure they told me the meaning of life, but every time I go to say it, I start bleeding out of my eyes, so I better just not. Fuck. There they go again. And of course, my other fuck you money patrons, Blanco, Liquor Cause I Know Her, Potato Scream, The Former Meaning of Life, The 1 AM Party, and Whitrow. And my god overanalyzers, Two Boots Are Beat, Ang, Andrew Watchard, Angle 4.2, Blade Dancer, Carlo Wren, Cosmic Newbie, Danny Stevens, Dr. Xerox, Dominic Saint, Aaron Grace, Jackson, Jeremy Rubenstein, John Warhammer, Creffin, Kirill Magnus, Mac, Marshall Rather, Matthew Lang, Michael Fellon, Mitchell Gobrecht, Nick, Nicholas Abbott, Philip Jindra, Rocket Mist, Ryan Maxwell, Scoobert, Shane Antonacci, Princess Useless Backwards, That Blind Ginger, and some sort of bare face, I don't know. Next up, hopefully something I enjoy a little bit more.